an event like Florida, you know, it scares us all. I follow Facebook, I'm on there, I see the concerns, I see the fears, I see the concerns about what are we doing as a school district, so I'm very happy to call this meeting tonight to tell you what we do as a school district, what we have in place as far as plans, what we do in place as far as drills, what we have on the horizon, and hopefully we can, you know, answer a lot of questions you have this evening. It's a very lengthy program, and a while back, right after the Florida shooting, we hadn't been together, all of us community partners as a group, so I pulled all the community partners that you see here this evening. It's kind of a roundtable discussion in a panel form, so there you have it. And we had a very, very good dialogue as far as, you know, if this happens, and God help us that it doesn't happen, that we're ready to go, we're ready to react, we're ready to, you know, put plans in place to address it and deal with it. So we discussed those plans, we discussed, you know, 911, we discussed the active shooter scenario, we discussed what the reaction is from the police department, we discussed the reaction as far as we as school personnel, what we do. And hopefully we're all going to engage in that discussion this evening as part of this agenda. So I'm going to start it off and I'm going to get right to it. And we have a very lengthy agenda. I do want you to have the chance to get some questions in. And I'm going to go ahead and start way over here and start introducing folks. And as I introduce you, raise your hand. First person I'd like to introduce is Under Sheriff Paul Holland. Sergeant Scott Hill, Oregon State Police. Michael Taylor, Sheriff, Lake County. Dave Sitzma, Town of Lakeview. Over here, Ryan Tagg, our Threat Assessment Coordinator at Oregon State Police. The District Attorney, Sheriff Forrester. Daly Middle School, Fremont Hay Union School Principal, Susan Warner. Bobby Stininger, she's a woman of many talents, not only is she our teacher, but she's also an EMS, and everything we wanted to know about anything related to first aid or anything like that, Bobby is always our go-to person. New to Lake County Juvenile Department, one of the directors, Marion Sullivan. Another individual representing the Lake County Juvenile Department, Mark Albertson. Also another representative of the Juvenile Department, Buddy Ness. The head of the Lake County Juvenile Department, Jake Greer. And happy to bring in Lake County Mental Health, Trace Gloucester. So, and then last but not least, Lake County ESD Superintendent Jack Thompson. So please help me welcome these people. The first thing we're going to talk about, my panel groups are welcome to stay at the table and just talk from those vantage points, are plans related to Lake County School District and what we do as far as lockdown, lockout, evacuation of the crew. Susan Warner discussed that.
Well, I'll try to do the podium, but I don't hold still very well, so we'll do our best. I really appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedules to come in and get some questions answered, and also be able to share accurate information about what we're doing in the schools. This is not something new for us. Some of the information may be new for you, but the I Love You Guys Foundation is a nationally recognized school emergency response protocol, and you have one as you came in. If you don't have one, you're welcome to grab one. But this foundation started, it was developed by John and Emily Keyes after their daughter Emily was killed in a school shooting in 2006. So it's been around for a considerable amount of time. As an admin team, about 4 or 5 years ago, we vetted several different school response protocols and decided on this one. So it kind of looks like this. I'm going to walk you through what happens in the drills as much as I can. The evacuation drill is not is going to be as detailed. But in the lockout drill for Lake County School District, all the schools use the same protocol. So I'll be speaking to some of the high school drills as well. In the lockout drill, the intercom system would say, please secure the perimeter, and we're in lockout. Teachers would gather kids into their classrooms. We have certain people assigned to sweep bathrooms, hallways, those kinds of things, into the classrooms. The teachers are asked to increase situational awareness. They take role account for their students. School proceeds as normal as possible, but students don't move between the buildings. We've locked everything out. Now this might happen in a lot of different situations actually that we don't always think about, but we try and think about as many different scenarios as we can. For example, we have an issue up here at the high school. For your kids' safety, I'm going to go ahead and lock out those buildings there and the union just because we don't know what the threat is. We haven't identified that threat, so we're going to lock out. Maybe we have a dog that we think is vicious on the playground. Bring the kids in, lock the doors, school still happens. We need that. A cougar, unfortunately, we do live in an area where that's a possibility from time to time. Or one of the other things that happens is law enforcement, notifies us that they have a prisoner that's escaped. We'll go ahead and lock things down. Movement decreases or stops altogether, and that's kind of what that drill looks like for lockout. In a lockdown alert, same thing, intercom is going to instruct everybody to lock down, and that one is in a more severe situation where law enforcement is definitely notified right away. That's the first call, and that's going to happen if we have a threat at any school facility at any time. Lockdown puts our kids in a classroom and they're quiet. And we have some protocols in place for them, but they're not all released to the public because we really don't want some of the public knowing exactly what we do with those kids. But they are asked to be quiet. We put them in the positions in the classroom that are least harmful, that they have the best chance of decreasing loss of life, I guess I should say. An evacuation alert, same kind of thing. Intercom instructs you to evacuate. We don't announce a place for evacuation until we're doing an actual drill. There's predetermined locations that we don't release to the public because we don't want someone going to those evacuation sites and harming additional kids. We've practiced these. When we evacuate to these predetermined locations, teachers have a binder they take with them, and they take roll account for the students, and then in the event that was a real situation, they would report their status from cell phones to school administration. And then once they're at their evacuation point, they wait for instructions to start reunification of parents, students with parents. And this alert could be through a mass communication system, email, text, or a phone call from your student's teacher. Parents driving around looking for those evacuation sites in the event of a real emergency or coming to the school creates a huge amount of hazard for our emergency response teams. So that's kind of what that situation might look like. The other drill that we do is a take shelter drill, and that might happen tornado, a hazmat situation, earthquake, flood, snowstorm that we really needed to just bring them inside because we had some kind of situation like that. The kids do these drills. They're kind of a drop and cover routine, like you would in an earthquake drill where they're under the tables. Stay put, be quiet, listen for directions. And then we also do a fire drill. Those have been, I'm sure all of you did them as well. In my day and age going to school, we did a fire drill, but we didn't get to do all these other drills. That's just a product of our society and where we're at. Fire drill, evacuating single file line, predetermined areas, several different areas are used at the elementary. I know the high school's working at changing that up a little bit, where those kids are going to different areas. We had a pretty lengthy list of questions, and so I'm going to go through just some miscellaneous notes to answer some of those questions for the public that we received ahead of time. Teachers talk to students, especially elementary age students, before we do these drills about why we do them, and the little guys know when we're doing a drill. Our bigger kids don't always know that we're doing a drill, but our little guys, they know, because it just sometimes it's pretty scary for them and they need to be deal from home and talk to parents and have parents support us and say, well, this is why we have to do these kinds of drills. Fire drills are carried out every month in the buildings. We can evacuate an elementary building in about a minute flat and have them a considerable amount, clear the fences usually. Our standard response protocol drills, the lockdown, lockout, take shelter, evacuate, are practiced every other month. And we've only had intercom systems at the elementary level this year, and so we're working through additional steps. The first one was to get our staff and kids on board and trained. The next steps are to push that a little further. So the next steps in this are to evacuate from assemblies, evacuate from recesses, which we've done, to have different people running the drills, because in the event of an emergency, anybody's going to be able, needs to be able to pick up that phone and run that intercom system. We need kids, we need to have a drill in place that we've practiced multiple times where kids go with whatever adult tells them they're evacuating, because we already have lots of life in a shooting situation. In the event that, because we've practiced with law enforcement multiple times, and I know they're going to speak to that a little bit. When we practice active shooter drills, our teachers have been encouraged that if, in the event that we have an intruder that enters the classroom, teachers and students are encouraged to fight an intruder with any means possible. And Clinton Heidi Smith, and I'd like them to raise their hands in the back, they made a sizable donation quite some time ago to put fire extinguishers next to every door in every classroom. They served as consultants during active shooter drill, and what they told us was that that was our teachers' best weapon. Because as teachers, they're going, okay, what can I do with a safer? And the fire extinguishers, the thought was, you spray the intruder coming in, and that buys you some seconds, some very valuable seconds, to then use your fire extinguisher as a weapon. So we're in the process of replacing those fire extinguishers because we are elementary and high school and teacher people. We wanted something, a fire extinguisher size, that a kid could handle in the event that we already had loss of life with a teacher. And the fire marshal didn't agree with that, and so we had to remove those fire extinguishers and replace them with something larger that met with the square footage area that the classrooms had. So, when elementary students register their student, the contact information is printed and goes into an emergency binder. And I'm just answering random questions, so I'm sorry if it sounds a little random. That came in, we had a parent that collected about 75 questions for us, which just really made a great discussion board for us. So they go to the emergency binder. Red binder goes with those students anytime they evacuate, so that they have that information. So when they get to that evacuation point, they can call you if mass communication doesn't work for us. If we don't have cell phone service, because those lines have got so many people going through them in the event of an emergency that they're jammed up. At the DMS and LHS level, students would call or text their parents, but if a child was unable to, or they were really shook up or needed assistance, staff would assist them. And school secretaries and paraprofessionals are those people that would be assisting those students in addition to the staff. We assign a paraprofessional with a staff member to go ahead and help them get reunited in the event of an emergency. We are working towards a mass communication system that populates from our online registration. We've had online registration at the elementary school for 1 year and 2 years at the high school, and so it can create real-time information quicker and a reunification time that will be quicker for our parents as well. All of our staff is required to hold a CPR and first aid card. Bobby's going to visit about that. These cards are renewed every 2 years, and our schools all have AED kits, LINS, first aid kits, and Bobby's going to visit with you a little bit more about trauma kits. Part of the reason that we know that some of these things happen have to do with bullying and harassment. So we wanted to also give you an overview of what was happening in the schools with anti-bullying and anti-harassment campaigns. At the elementary level, Mrs. Cahill teaches a second-step curriculum that addresses bullying, harassment, conflict resolution, helping kids, give them the tools that they need on the playground and classroom, bus, football, whatever they're doing. This year, we have a little run of kids saying things that they shouldn't, making threats. So law enforcement and myself travel from room to room in every school, K through 6, and talk to them about bullying and harassment and making threats and what that meant. Even if they thought we were just joking, we took the threat seriously, and there would be consequences for that. In grade 6, law enforcement and teachers put on a presentation and talked to students about Measure 11 crime. Measure 11 crimes, once your child turns 12, have to do with sexting or cyberbullying things, and they need to be aware of that when they hit those ages. In all the schools, staff identify students who need to make positive connections with adults, because those kids that make those positive connections with adults are less likely to drop out of school, they're less likely to commit crime, but they're also more apt to do well in school, and we want that for our kids. So staff identifies kiddos that really need to make some positive adult connections. And then you mix it all up and you make sure it's not a person that's their English teacher or their math teacher expecting them to really get their work done. You want them to have positive connections with that person and not have it connected to core instruction. You want them to be able to visit with that person and tell them what they did this weekend. And that's one of the things that happens in all of your buildings. Each year, administration chooses a district-wide activity to address bullying and harassment. 2 years ago, your high school students, your middle school and high school students put together skits, they put together activities, they put together a quilt, a fabric, they did all kinds of really great stuff. And the elementary kids came out and they spent the entire day going from room to room, place to place, and every single message had to do with either bullying and anti-bullying and anti-harassment type tools to give the kids. And the high school kids just did a fabulous job with this. Last year, we brought in a gentleman from a company called Teen Truth, and he specifically puts on presentations for schools dealing with bullying and harassment. And it's kind of along the theme of speaking your truth. What is your truth? Who are you really? And gives kids some other tools as well. The middle school and high school level, Jackie Robinson teaches a response program in her health class. And this program centers around healthy outlets for teens and also suicide prevention. The teachers are also trained in this response program and kind of what to look for, but we really don't feel like we've gone far enough with that. We have lots of kiddos that have a lot on their plate. So one of the future plans for the high school is mental first aid training for teachers to work with students. Bobby, does first aid training for us, but we need to help our kids and give them mental first aid training for teachers so we can help these kiddos in other areas. The middle school and high school admin and counseling meet with probation and juvenile monthly to work with kids that are, and staff kids that are struggling with mental health and juvenile probation issues as well. We need to keep ears and eyes on those folks and know what's happening with those kids, and so we have a real strong connection with them. Counseling and admin staff have also completed threat assessment training with Ryan Tagg. Jack Thompson, our ESD superintendent, brought this program to us, and it helps us, it gives us some tools as school administrators, because we don't have that law enforcement background, to work with Ryan to be able to assess a kiddo and where he's at. He or she, how are they doing? Should we have this child at school? What kind of supports do we need? What kind of interventions do we need to make this situation okay for the kid and okay for our students? A drug dog goes through, as often as we can get it. We don't have access to a drug dog all the time, but it does come to the high school as often as possible. And then administration also would like to work towards putting Measure 11 presentations more frequently into high school classrooms as well. And Measure 11 was the cyberbullying and sexting. And then your kiddos take a Healthy Teen Survey. I think every other year, don't quote me on that, I'm not up here. But the results of this have been presented to the high school staff, kind of in conjunction with that mental health piece to help understand what our kids are doing when they're not at school. Sometimes when they are, we have an issue. But what they're doing, what kind of behaviors are risky that they're engaging in, and how we can help address those things in interventions. We have a few things on the table coming up. I know Mr. Cahill's going to talk about this later on, but some of the future plans, some of the things that we wanted to do. We've had hustle intruder and active shooter drills with law enforcement with our staff, and we've put in an intercom system. And then future plans kind of look like, we have some consultants coming in the spring. They are going to go through and they're going to do a kind of a top to bottom overview of some of the things we need to do facility-wise. And one of those pieces is safety, school safety, what it would cost to make some changes structurally. Mass communication via text and email is something that we're exploring. We think our student database can link to that and do that for us, but we're investigating that. We are examining the cost of a buzz indoor system in all of our schools. We have plans to limit even more entry points and times that we give public access to our students, which is a double-edged sword. I had some folks in my school today from Portland, and they said, "You're going to lock your schools up?" And I said, "Yeah, even more so than they already are." And he said, "That's so sad. We love coming to this little community in this school because it kind of seems like the old days." And I would love nothing more than it to be the old days. But that's not where we're at, unfortunately. We already have plans to move some student services around within our buildings so our kids aren't outside moving between buildings near as much. We looked at examining the cost to replace all of the interior doors to close inward because they even put a door stop underneath the door, and it's much more difficult for an intruder to get in, and it buys you some time. And then we're making additions as we speak to all the first aid kits to include some trauma materials and trauma items in each classroom. Have any questions at the end?
In addition to what Susan said about the access between Fremont and Hay, we have a lot of, between special education, Title I-A, and a number of things, students are going back and forth. So that is one definite area we're really looking at as far as what we limit that traffic back and forth. And it's the same here too. You have a number of classes that are over in that building, and you have classes over here, and then we have the traffic flow back and forth on the north end here as well. We've got to figure out something to do in order to, so that door is locked, and possibly they're going around front door to front door on both these buildings. So we're fleshing that out. We really need to look at our class passing time, our class schedule, and everything else, and make that happen. Right now, quite a number of doors in all these buildings are locked, and they are locked throughout each day. Stay locked during activities and athletic events, and that is a precautionary thing to do as well. Mrs. Stininger and I, we're working on plans in the event we have an activity at Honker Court, and we need to evacuate Honker Court. And why don't you come up here, Bobby, and tell them about what happened the one time when this building had a fire. I'm inviting you up.
Well, I hope you can hear me. Several years ago, we had a girls' basketball game going on. And all of a sudden, Bill Johnson, who was a teacher at that time, came running to me, and I was listening, and said, "Bobby, we have to evacuate the building because it's on fire." Well, we didn't see smoke or anything else, and nobody blew. So I got out in the middle of the court and tried to get the referees to stop the game, and they didn't do it. And pretty soon, the fire was in this hallway on the other side of the building. And actually, we finally got them outside, but they didn't want to go out because it was cold. And and actually the building was on fire. But it was very difficult to do, so we are working on something.
Yeah, getting a plan to evacuate a big crowd that's on the court. So, okay, well, that's what we've been doing in these buildings as far as drills and evacuation, lockdown, lockout, fire drills, cougar drills. We do every type of drill. So the kids love cougar drills. And we yell cougar out on the playground. Their thing is to bunch up in a big circle and be big. And back up the building and go into the building. So they get a great kick out of that. I think they enjoy the cougar drill. So have you done a cougar drill with this year? I'm pleased to turn the conversation over to our police force. They're going to talk about 911 response and their reaction. And also, we've done a training in these buildings, sometimes 2 a year, called DPSST. You guys can tell what the acronym stands for. And We bring an outside entity that comes in, and it is a live on. You know, we bring the Boy Scouts in, Bobby brings kids in to play victims. It is a very true to life scenario. So I'm going to start off Mike Taylor and let him address that.
The first thing I'd like to do is just introduce a couple people that haven't been recognized yet. Is Clinton and Heidi Smith. Clinton and Heidi Smith are reserves for the Lake County Sheriff's Office. Wow. Somebody was Can you guys hear me back there? Okay. Clinton and Heidi Smith are the owners of Thunder Ranch. They're reserve deputies for the Lake County Sheriff's Office. They have been very instrumental with the training of active shooter, with the shooting exercises and training of all law enforcement here in Lake County. And they have been, like I say, very instrumental with active shooter training. So, Clinton. I'd like to do is start off with the Florida school shooting. That's why we're here. I've heard a lot of comments and a lot of press seen on TV that different perspectives of what happened at that school. The officers were cowards. The officers were not cowards. They didn't go in. They should have gone in. Whatever. And I'd like the local law enforcement, everybody here, just jump in if you have something to add to this. I am not going to judge the character of these deputies at that shooting because I was not there. And I don't know their policies. I don't know whether they were told to set up a perimeter. I don't know whether the policies say to go in. I would not judge their character. Their sheriff says they should have gone in and eliminated the threat. Yet when 2 SWAT team officers went into that school to eliminate the threat, they were disciplined for going in. So who knows what happened? Who knows what their policies are? We weren't told. We don't know. The sad thing about a situation like this is you never know your ability as to whether you have the courage to confront a situation like that until it happens. There's many of us here right now that have never been in that situation. And until we are there, it will be determined at that time whether we have the courage. Some of us may not. Some of us may. It's sad to say that we've got to learn at this time whether we'll be able to do it or not. But if you are not capable of doing that, you should not be a law enforcement officer, in my opinion. But we'll never know. Anyway, I just wanted to get that out because I'm sure many people are saying, okay, these deputies, these officers are cowards. No, we don't know. We don't know until all the information comes out, and whether we'll get the truth is unknown. Anyway, I'm going to address what the Lake County Sheriff's Office policy is. The training that we have, the training that we get at DPSST, and DPSST stands for the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training. It's an academy in Salem where all certified law enforcement officers go and get certified. Probation and patrol go there and get certified. Corrections deputies go there and get certified. Dispatchers go there and get certified. It's one big organization that certifies all law enforcement entities in the state of Oregon. When we have an active shooter, you know, what makes up that person? What do we know about him from the history that we have seen over the years? The makeup of a person that will go into a school and actually start taking the lives of innocent people. Usually it's some kind of bullying that has occurred over the years. Whether they're in school or they're not in school, they have been a victim of a bullying situation. Oftentimes they have mental health issues. Low self-esteem, kind of withdrawn, and when they snap, they're going to take the revenge out on somebody. And where do they go? They go to a soft target. What do I mean by a soft target? A soft target is a place that's not armed and can't defend against something like this. Law enforcement in Lake County has trained in this particular school and schools throughout the county in our active shooter drills. Lake County Sheriff's Office is mandatory training. Oregon State Police is mandatory training. Probation and parole, they make it mandatory training. We have BLM, we have the Forest Service, we have Modoc County Sheriff's Office come up and train us. We have our local fire responders and EMTs, teachers, dispatchers, and even the hospital gets involved in these trainings. So what's the training consist of? The training consists of a call response to a high school where there's an active shooter. We respond, we go in, we address the threat, we eliminate the threat, and then we put into action our other scenario where we have injured people down, we tag them, red, green, yellow. Red is deceased, yellow needs immediate attention, and green is somebody who can get up and walk out of those hospital. All the scenario plays out. We do multiple scenarios that involve this type of active shooting. Our particular response, and I'll read this to you. I'm not going to do the whole thing because it's quite lengthy. But this is the purpose, the primary purpose of our policy is this. The primary mission of the Lake County Sheriff's Office when confronted with an active shooter, active threat situation will be to locate and stop the active shooter, active threat as soon as possible, utilizing the immediate and rapid deployment of its resources and personnel. In an active shooter, active threat situation, immediate action by the police is required when lives are being taken and/or immediate jeopardy, or when lives have been taken and apparently will continue to be taken. Effective response to an active shooter or active threat situation requires those deputies first on the scene to immediately attempt to stop the active shooter and active threat. The primary mission of the responding deputies in an active shooter active threat incident is to locate and stop the threat as soon as possible. The response tactics used by the deputies in an active shooter or active threat situation are not substitute for conventional response tactics to a barricaded subject or a hostage situation. Completely different response when you have a barricaded suspect or a hostage situation. In those kind of situations, you form a perimeter, you isolate, negotiate, and if you have to, you eliminate. An active shooter situation, we're coming in, our optimal response is 2 people. The first law enforcement officers on the scene, you are forming what's called a contact team. You're entering the building and you are addressing that threat. Now, people say, well, what about the rights of this active shooter? We've heard it. What about the rights of this person and their kids? Well, once they enter the school with a firearm and they start hurting people, they don't have any rights. They do have choices. They have 2 choices. Number 1 to give up immediately, and number 2 is die. That's it, end of story. Our job is to come here, eliminate the threat. And we're not going to take them in custody. That's not what we're trying to do. If they want to immediately give up, we'll take them into custody. I mean, we're not here to murder anybody, but we are here to preserve life and safety of people. They give up or they die. End of story. We're not negotiating. We're going to kill that person. Because if we don't, more innocent lives are taken. An active shooter active threat is someone who is actively engaging in shooting, assaulting, and threatening victims with deadly force. Any commissioned deputy may find themselves as one of the closest responding deputies to an active shooter active threat incident. An effective response to an active shooter active threat situation requires those first deputies on the scene to form a contact team, often consisting of 2 people, if the situation permits the stop. However, when you get that call, and I'm going to just use Lakeview for an example, there's going to be more law enforcement in this area than usually in the south. So it doesn't make any difference jurisdictionally or responding. If we get here and the backup unit's going to be here within a reasonable time, and when I say a reasonable time, I'm talking 10, 15, 20 seconds, we'll wait for that second person. If it's going to be minutes, we're going in by ourselves. And we have to address and eliminate that threat. That's what our policies are. That's what we are trained to do. And that's what we will do. We're not going to form a perimeter up there and wait for 1,000 people to come in and then negotiate with this person. I just need you to understand, we're eliminating that threat. Whatever means it takes to eliminate it. Now, the succession in which we arrive will determine our role in this situation. If you're first on the scene, you're a contact team, you're going in and pressing the threat. If you're second on this team, 2 people, you're a contact team and going in and pressing that threat, providing backup for the first contact team. If you're fourth on the scene, you're setting up inner perimeter. Inner perimeter is helping students, teachers, and whoever get to a safe place. The next officers on the scene are setting up an outer perimeter. They're preventing anything from coming inside that perimeter. So we are securing that school now. We're securing that outside area. Nothing's coming in. The inner perimeter is allowing the students and teachers and all innocent lives out of that area, and our contact teams are in and pressing them. So I'm not going to get into a whole lot of other things that we're doing, setting up command posts and then doing this and doing that, because that's insignificant. I think what you're interested in is how we can address that. But that's how we're going to do it.
Do you guys have anything to add on that?
So that is our policy, as basic as I want to give it. It's more complicated than that. We have the tasks of the incident commander, the backup of deputies, inner perimeter, the outer perimeter. We have our staging area, some rescue teams. So and it goes into a detail, but there's no sense in covering that. Clint, do you have anything to add on that specific addressing that?
No, sir.
Stand down. As far as our training is concerned, I think I've covered that, what we do when we address these issues. The other thing that you'll see is we'll deal with is when we deal with other agencies that don't train with us on a regular basis. Where I came from, Tacoma, Pierce County Sheriff, we had a SWAT team, we had a team like this, we trained together. But we had other entities out there. We had Furcrest, we had Hamilton, we had Five. They never trained with us. So it was helter-skelter and absolutely chaos. When we got to an incident and we needed immediate action, we didn't train together. We went one way, they went one way, we didn't know what they were doing, they didn't know what we were doing, we didn't have the same radio contact. It became quite frustrating and very, very potential for a friendly fire engagement. The good thing that we have with the law enforcement in this county is we train together. For the most part, we're on the same channel with the exception of Oregon State Police. They do, however, have a channel that they can get our local channel, so this is just a matter of switching over, but we can communicate. Everything seems to be going in a smooth direction to address this particular issue. So, with that being said, I think that is all I have here as far as this. I was going to address that with the other issue, but we can do that. I can do that right now. Here it's not, in Lakeview, we're not going to have that big a problem that I'm about to talk to next. It's going to be Paisley, and it's going to be North Lake, it's going to be Union schools that we're going to have problems. I'm going to propose or throw out some ideas later on in this meeting here that some of you are probably not going to like. It's not meant to be adversarial. It's just to start a discussion and see what direction we want to go. But where I'm going with this right now is if we respond to an active shooter in North Lake, depending on how many deputies are on duty, it's going to do 30, 40, 50 minutes before we get there. And that is running code. And when I say code, lights and siren at the fastest speed we can get to get there, while trying to be safe and not endangering the public with the speed that you're traveling. Well, what's going to happen is, if your child is in that high school and you hear that there's an active shooter in there, what are you going to do? You're going to grab a gun and you're going to go try to save your kid. And if you don't do it, there's a problem. I'm going to be there if it's my child, and I know you guys are going to be there too if it's your child. This is the problem we have. We're responding to an active shooter that somebody is in there with a gun killing people. So when law enforcement arrives, what are we going to do? We're identifying you as possibly a bad guy. If you got a gun, you're getting shot. That's a bottom line. There's going to be problems. So my recommendation, if that ever happens, if you do respond to help, when you see law enforcement come, you drop that gun. And you put your hands up and you back away. Let us address the issue if it has not already been addressed. All we're going to do at that point is just clean up the carnage, because usually these active shooters last maybe 2 or 3 minutes at the most. At the most. And then they take off like this guy in Florida. He does this damage, he gets out, he blends in with the crowd, and they move on. So that is potentially a very, very dangerous situation. So if it ever happens, just remember, if you do go there, and I'm not suggesting you do, but if you do go there when law enforcement arrives, put that gun down, because you will be engaged. And then there's some other issues I want to address here later on down as far as what are the possibilities of keeping the schools safe. And this is where it's going to be kind of controversial. So I'll wait until we're done with that, and I'll address that in fair.
I guess I just kind of reiterate what Mike was saying, that we all, in a situation where it's a school shooting, we're all the same. We're all just police officers. The agencies don't really matter. We're all going to respond the same. The nice part about UPSST is we're all, in Oregon, law enforcement, we're all trained the same. So I know what these guys, even if I've never trained with Dave here, I know what he's going to do, he knows what I'm going to do, and that really makes it a better scenario for everybody. I know state police, we train just like the sheriff's office, at least once a year in active shooters, and it's one of those things where you're just going to have to trust that we know what we're doing, we rely on each other, and that we're going to go in there and we're going to solve the problem. Like Mike was saying, if a bunch of people start showing up with guns trying to solve the problem for us, it's just going to create more of a problem for us and definitely more of a problem for you guys. Because that's just it. I mean, our sole purpose on an active shooter, and I've had the misfortune of actually responding to an active shooter. I spent a few years on the state police SWAT team, and there was an active shooter up in Clackamas County at the mall, and we were training in the area and we were the first team on scene. So I was there, we cleared the whole mall, a lot of carnage, but I've been there and I've done it, and I know that we're not going to ask questions. This isn't a time to give the shooter an opportunity to put his hands up and surrender. We're not going to announce ourselves, we're just going to go in and basically handle the job. So if somebody else, heaven forbid, you come in to protect your kids, if you have a gun, that's it, it's over. And we're trying to prevent that, but just trust me when I say we train together. We trained together in the past. We're going to do a lot more trainings together in the future, having meetings with the school, and train with the school board, and train with all the school staff and all the local agencies. And I think it's going to be very successful in the future. So,
I'm going to go ahead and address this issue that I was talking about. So if you have a sheet, we're going to jump to number 10. Employee sharing plan. So that is very controversial and highly offensive. As far as teachers carrying firearms, not only do I support it, I advocate it. And I'll tell you why. And I'll give you my perspective. It's not as crazy as you might think it is, but there's a number of different things we can do to protect the kids in our school. A lot of people think that this is just a law enforcement issue. It's not. This is a community issue. This is your issue. This is administration's issue. It's teachers' issue. It is a student issue. And it is a law enforcement issue. It is a community issue. If we cannot keep our kids safe in the school, we have failed them as a community. Not just law enforcement, all of us. We've failed our kids as a community. So what are our options? What are we willing to spend? What are we willing to risk? Are we willing to risk our life to protect them? Are we willing to risk a couple bucks and maybe a levy, a bond, or initiative, a law enforcement initiative to put law enforcement officers in school? I don't know. This is a community concern. This is a community. We can lock the schools down so they're completely locked down, and in order to get to schools, you're going to have to buzz them in through video camera. But what's that do with the person with the gun? It just gives them a little bit more time to reach that door and get in. It gives us a little bit more time to respond. We could have 3 full deputies or 3 full-time officers, but that's going to cost about $300,000. And is it worth the law enforcement levy, bond, or initiative? Are we willing to pay a couple extra bucks a year for deputies and officers in the school? If they were in the school, we could utilize them on the street during the summertime. The schools could get a grant for 3 positions. And the grant would pay for them in the schools, in the high schools, for 9 months. Maybe the city and the county could supplement their pay for 3 months and utilize them during the summertime. Also, do we look at hiring the possibility of retired law enforcement officers? How many do we have around? How many retired military do we have around here that would be willing to do that? But it's not just I was in the military and I was in law enforcement. It's an extensive process. What do? You get volunteers. You go through an oral board, you go through an extensive background investigation, you go through a psychological examination. Because let's face it, a lot of cops that are retired and a lot of military people that come back from the chaos overseas, they have PTSD, or DPSSD, they have PTSD. And they may not be able to psychologically handle this type of job. So we have to weed them out if they don't qualify. Then they have to go to DPSST for the firearms training, or the week long firearms training. Then they have to train with law enforcement and qualify with them regularly. They got to go through the active shooter training, and then stay up on the qualifications, the certifications, so on and so forth. So how much time are they willing to spend doing this kind of stuff? Yes. All these things need to be addressed. Then there is the question of whether we should arm teachers. That's not a question I can answer. That's a question our community and the school administration can answer. Do I support it? Yes, I do. Do I advocate it? Yes, I do. Based on this. Same qualifications like I said. You have volunteers. They go through this extensive background check. They go through the certifications, the training. And am I advocating they carry it on their person? Absolutely not. That is not a safe environment for our kids. Let's face it. You have a teacher my age, you have a 20-year-old football player, we get into some kind of deal. Well, who do you think is going to win there? It's going to be me. I mean, physically, I cannot stand up towards a 20-year-old that's a football player and retain my weapon. Most law enforcement officers die by the use of their own weapon because they get overpowered, they get it taken away from them, they get shot with it. So what I advocate is this, and this is just a starting point. Is it realistic? I don't know, but I think it needs to be discussed. For those teachers who do want to carry firearms and want to be that first line level of defense, strategically put lock boxes in the school where the firearms can be kept and they can only be opened through fingerprint recognition. That is just my idea. That's what I would support. It may not work, it may work, but we have to have somebody on the premises at all times to prevent this kind of tragedy. Because what do these guys do when they go through they get confronted? They start shooting, they get confronted. What do they usually do? They commit suicide. They give up, they commit suicide, it's over with. So if you have an armed person on the premises, they get confronted right away. you put an end to it. 1974, Israel implemented the process of arming teachers in the schools. They had 2 active shooters before 1974. 1974 and on, they have not had 1 active shooter because they have armed their teachers. Is that the right answer? I don't know. It seems like they're going in the right direction. I wouldn't be opposed to it. Maybe there's flaws in my thinking. I haven't thought this all the way through, but just trying to be objective and realistic, I think that is a good approach. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
Right now, as far as school district policy goes, all schools in Oregon, one, Mr. Gustavus, our board member told me about, are under the category of gun-free zones, which means no firearms within 1,000 feet of school. So it's going to be a discussion that I'm going to be having with my peers, the other superintendents and everything else, as far as this notion of arming schools. Tonight, I have no answer for you. It's something I'm going to have to do a lot of learning and a lot of research on in order to find out, if it is something that is viable, if it is something that is safe, if it is something that is legal, and, what, alternative schools have in that regard. But today, as of today, on March 13th, 2018, all schools in this district under policy are gun-free zones according to our policies. So, hey, more to come later on.
Gun-free zones with the exception of the active shooter.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Next, in our questions that were submitted to us in advance of this forum is the piece, what are we going to do to treat injured students? So I immediately involved Bobby Stinger on the committee. She has been a part, she and her sports medicine kids have been a part of a number of these DPSST trainings we've had. Just to give you some background on that, we've had one in this building, we've had one at Fremont, we've had one at ADA. Actually, I think we've had 2 in this building, and I had to take all of them. They're a very interesting thing to watch. So I'm talking to law enforcement about, one being scheduled soon. So I will put out the word, is it okay if the public comes and watches it, guys, or what's usually your policy on that? DPSSD trainings.
The one problem that I would have with that is we have strategic things that are not knowledgeable to the public. We don't want the public to know, because if they know and they become a suspect, they know what we're going to do. That is one concern. I don't know if that's a concern.
Just our tactics and the training that we use to isolate the threat. We'd like to do a little bit more in-house.
Okay, without further ado, as far as treating the wounded, I turn over to Bobby Stinger.
As has already been said, we do every year 50% of our entire district, that all include cooks, maintenance people, bus drivers, get it every year, etc. Every one of them go through first aid, CPR, use of AEDs, and so they do have some background, some training. So we do have a lot of people that are on board that can do certain things. They're not highly medical trained. We do have also within the classes that I teach people who have basic life support training, give oxygen, use ambulance bags, those kinds of things, and we have all of that available in this building. So we do have a lot of people that can render help. All of the teachers, about 64 of these, this bag looks exactly like the bag that we have at the emergency service building in a big duffel bag in case we have something happen that we can throw these out to someone and they can start taking care of people. If you want to know the contents, raise your hand and then I'll do it, but otherwise I won't take that time. Teachers will be trained, most of it, they've already been trained in. So it has emergency aid kit. We have one item that we were trying to secure. It's a little more costly, but I think we've got some avenues to take care of that. And that's tourniquets, because it's been proven that actually a lot of the people who died in Florida could be saved with tourniquets. And so that takes, those are quite expensive, and it also takes special training that we'll have to do. These will be given to teachers in every school and every building. So that's already been taken care of. In this building, this has not happened in the middle, in the grade schools, they do have what's called door socks. And basically what a door, and they're being built by our maintenance people here. And a door sock is something that the teacher can already have the door locked, but someone can get in because of this sock that comes around and hooks on both sides of the door, on the doorknob. So if they felt like they had to lock their door, they don't need to go looking for their keys or anything else. All they have to do is flip that sock off the outside and shut the door in as well. So we don't have to worry about whether they can find their keys or if a substitute would be there and then have keys or those kinds of things. The elementary school has most of their doors on that way. And it's being done for these buildings up here. We'll talk a little bit about crowd control, and we are working with that. And once we distribute these to the various teachers, etc., we'll visit about crowd control at the same time. The other thing was about EMS. The thing you have to know about EMS is that if anything happens, they can't do nothing until these people say we can come in. We can't rush in, we can't go in, we can stage and have places where we want to have certain types of injuries located, that type of thing, but we can't handle it. The only thing I can say about that is you can be darn sure that anybody that's trained is going to be right there, or at whatever school we're dealing with. So EMS is well trained, they know what they're doing. We have 3 ambulances, well, 2 in the rescue rig, and I guarantee you that if something like that were to happen, that they would be here. We have been here, and we have been trained when they've had active shooter drills, we've taken people out. Actually, that's what we don't like to say, we shouldn't.
Well, you did very well. You're the only one who's got a wonderful call so far. Good job. Okay, next on our agenda, I'm very pleased to introduce Trace Wanzer. She's Lane County Mental Health. There's quite a reaction as far as the trauma of these things, you know, working with victims, working with parents, working with staff, working with employees. We've had a couple of things happen in this building in the last couple of years where we had a death in the building, and mental health has been critical of that as far as us establishing points of contact for kids to know, talk about the issue with an expert mental health official. And I'm very pleased to have Trace here tonight, so welcome.
I'm Trace Wanzer, and I'm the Executive Director of the Lake District Wellness Center, which was formerly the Lake County Mental Health Center. And we are fully prepared to deploy as many staff after an incident to assist and support the students, the parents, staff, and the community at large. We are in the planning stages of having a trauma-informed care training for our community partners this summer. So we will be sending that out as soon as the final details are worked out. And we are open and willing to do whatever it is to ensure that our community has psychological safety and wellness.
Questions for Trace?
Thank you.
You guys can stay seated and come up. Pleased to welcome the North County Juvenile Department. They've really been an active part. Sharon did. It's the second time I've done that today. Welcome, Sharon. Thank you. Pleased to have District Treasurer Sharon Forrest with us tonight. And we'll talk about legal issues around these specific things. Thank you.
So as I sat here, I thought in my office this afternoon what we were going to talk about, and as I look around the room, you know, probably two of the greatest days of your life was the day that you sent your child to school at kindergarten, and the day that they graduate. And you never dreamed that you're going to be sitting in here today talking about this subject. And it's very, very troubling to me as I sit here and look around the room with the parents. And I just want to say that all of us on this side of the room, that we have worked and we're working as a team to say that your kids, we want them to be safe. And I don't think there's any of us that feel any different, and we do want to work as a team. And there has been instances since I've been in office that we have come together and we called each other and we met as a team. There was an instance that happened in the school that we met at the courthouse to try to address an immediate issue that happened at the school. And that is what we will do if it's not an active shooter. There are other things that happen at school that rise to need all of us together to come together as a team. And that's what we do. We call, we get together, and we meet, and we pool all of our resources, whether it's juvenile, it's the sheriff, it's the city, it's the state police, it's DHS. We all come together to pull all of our resources with the school. We had an instance where Mr. Cahill was on the phone and meeting with us, and we had a huge big conference to see what we could do to meet with this. And I want you parents to know what is so important for all of us to do our jobs is that you know that we're doing everything possible to keep your children safe. I see on Facebook where everybody is panicking and they're throwing out the worst thing that we have right now is social media. Sheriff Taylor said we're here because of Florida. We're also here because shortly after Florida there was an incident at the school and everybody panicked and felt like we weren't doing our jobs. And I will tell you that the call came into my office shortly after something happened from Mr. Cahill. And we all reacted and started working on that incident to do what we can. And there were things on Facebook that said, why is the student not in jail? I want you guys to know that legally we cannot just go snatch somebody up and throw them in jail. We can't do that. I know that you want us to, but sometimes it's not a criminal matter. And Facebook social media is scary what it's doing. It's creating hysteria. And that makes it worse for us. It's not always criminal. Sometimes these kiddos have mental health issues. And they're reaching out. They're reaching out for attention. Granted, we're going to give them attention. Because ultimately we may end up with something like what we had in Florida if we don't give them attention. But giving them attention on social media is sometimes a real negative. And it hampers what you're trying to do. And so I know that you guys are looking for criminal action in something, and sometimes there's not charges that we can do. These are kiddos. And for us to run out and charge them with criminal charges, if it's your kiddo, you don't want their name on Facebook. Do you, if your child has done something to reach out because they're troubled, do you want some other parent to put your child's name on Facebook? No. understand that Mr. Greer in the juvenile department and his team here, we're doing everything we can to resolve this situation. Ms. Warner, Mr. Will, Mr. Cagle, we're doing it. We're doing everything we can within the legal realm. We can't just go busting in their house. There's search warrants, there's legal means. We can't just come kick in your door. There's legal issues that we have to follow. There's protocols. We have to protect these kids. We have to protect their families. And we're all meeting. We're all putting our heads together to do everything we can. And just because somebody's got a list of stuff that they want to do to get attention doesn't mean that we can throw them in jail. We can't put kids in our jail down here. Kids have to go into detention. We don't have a facility here in Lakeview that we can hold kids at. They have to go to the plant. And then they have to be brought before the judge, and the judge has to make a decision whether they can be held or not. So, but throwing that stuff up on Facebook, and if you don't have the answers and making it up as you go along, that's the biggest problem we have here, is if you guys don't know the answers, and I'm not saying you guys, but people are making it up as they go along, and they're just making it worse. So, the charges for kids are different than adults. All kids, they can't be charged as adults on everything. And so this latest incident that we had, and I'm not going to give light to it, I'm just going to say that we couldn't just throw that kid in jail. And it had to be investigated, and it was investigated. There's been a couple of incidences in the last month. And all of those kids are being dealt with, and they're being dealt with, again, a lot of these kids have mental health issues. They come from troubled homes, and they're, that's what we're trying to deal with. And let's face it, healthy kids are not doing this stuff. And these shootings that have been happening in the high schools across the country, a lot of these are kids. They're kiddos. And where people are saying maybe I'm getting out politically here, that it's a gun issue, it's a mental health issue. A lot of times this is a mental health issue. It's not necessarily a gun issue. So if anybody's got questions for me on the laws, and I'll be happy to stay afterwards and talk to you about the laws and what the elements are of these charges for these things, and whether it's disorderly conduct, whether it's menacing, the bullying issues, we're dealing with those. A lot of times what we've got is kids that are feeling like they're being bullied, and we're going back and we're dealing with those. And Ms. Warner and Mr. Cagle are phenomenal at working with law enforcement and calling us when they need our help. And we're right there, and we're all coming together and putting our heads together and combining our resources. So know that we're doing everything we can. And as a prosecutor, I never dreamed I would be standing here talking to parents about kids behaving badly in school and scaring other kids. It's garbage. It's garbage in all of these officers. Thank you.
I'm going to chime in on that.
What's your question?
Oh, I just wondered if these kids are receiving mental health services?
They are getting help. They see help. They are getting a lot of help through DHS and mental health. That is part of the juvenile. Yes?
I used to work in a school, and I saw bullying a lot, and a lot of teachers are really, they're stressed with all the paperwork, and they have to, get recertified and all that, and it's a lot of paperwork. But I would encourage parents to empower their kids by saying, and I've seen it lots of times, and I've told my kids, if somebody's picking on you, and the teacher doesn't know what's going on, you use that child's name, and you say what they are doing, and you ask them to stop. And if the teacher doesn't hear that, then you say it again louder. And it's just empowering our kids. And sometimes our kids don't have an answer, and the teacher is asking for an answer, and it is okay for them to ask to somebody else who has an answer. So it's all about education and empowering our kids and not taking it to the next level. I had to get creative because I also used to be a new duty playground, and there was 15 portables on the playground, and there was the door was going in and out for discipline, and I had to get creative because it's a tough world out there for everybody, especially our kids. it's just about empowerment and information.
We
And,
encourage them to do that. We really, the classes, in my role as administrator, Susan's role as administrator, we tell them, we can't help you with what we don't know.
exactly.
We need to know, you know, and sometimes they're fearful to come and talk to us, both parents and kids. But, you know, we want to help. We want to stop it. We want to nip it in the bud. If we know, we can help and do that. Time and time again, I've found out in my long career of these instances of bullying, only to find out that it had been going on for a very long period of time, months, maybe even years that had been going on. And, you know, had I known about it, I could have done something about it. I could have reacted. I could have hopefully nipped the bud and into the situation. So, anyway, I'm going to dovetail on what Sharon said. It's kind of on item number 8, and it's related to, you know, what was on Facebook a while back in regard to that one instance, you know, she's referring to, everybody knows about the kill list incident. I think that the public is concerned about me as far as incidents like that are concerned is, why didn't I say something sooner? Why didn't I get the word out quicker? Why didn't I tell you that day? Why didn't I give you the student's name? And that being said, here's usually what happens when those things happen. First off, you know, I either received the word through another kid, I received the word through a note, I see the actual note, and then I fly into full detective mode. In order to fly into full detective mode, I need an air of confidentiality to do that. Pulling in kids separately, talking to kids, getting down to brass tacks and making a thorough investigation in order to, you know, learn who it is and eventually, hopefully, have that kid, you know, confess that, yes, I did it. In an ideal world, that's what we want to hear, and that they have some remorsefulness in regard to that. So the last one it happened on a late Friday afternoon on President's Day weekend at 2:40 in the afternoon. 3 o'clock is when the kids get out. I had a chance to talk with one person, and that was it. So we had Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Tuesday morning, we fly into high gear investigating. I had the Lakeview Police Department there. I had the Lake County Juvenile Department there. We got a number of witnesses. We spent the entire morning that morning, you know, interviewing witnesses. The witnesses were on the list. And in addition, the person who wound up being a person. And so by the time we got done with that, you know, we were pretty much all the way through the big chunk of Tuesday. So by the time I get through doing that, and I need to back myself up on Friday afternoon, when I learned of the students on the kill list, I was on the phone to each and every one of those parents. Your child, we found this list today, is on this list. You know, please, it helps my investigation much, much more to be thorough. If, you know, you don't broadcast it on Facebook over the weekend, we keep it at a quiet level, then Monday or Tuesday when we come back, I'm more effective in my job. And that was the case, and parents were very grateful for the notification. They worked with their student, they counseled their students over the weekend, and, you know, then into Tuesday, once we got the individual caught, I called all those parents again and let them know that we have the individual in custody. We removed that individual, and I turned it over to law enforcement and the juvenile department. So that was the end of the day on Tuesday. On Wednesday is the day I released a formal press statement to our webpage and also the Lake County Examiner. So that's the process usually these things take. And a lot of times, you know, the question is, why didn't we know the day of? Why didn't we know the day before? And that's usually the process we go through. In addition to that, in addition to me calling the parents, the one thing we learned in this last incident that we need to do a better job as far as bringing all our partners here, sitting up here with us this evening, into the conversation. I called Lakeview PD. I had the juvenile department. However, I had not involved the sheriff's department. I had not involved the Oregon State Police. Lesson learned. When we did our debrief, you know, 2-3 weeks ago to plan this evening's meeting, that's an agreement we all had together, that if we have something like that happen again, I'm the point of contact. I contact all our community partners and I let them know. And we're all on the same page. So that's kind of what goes into each and every one of these things. We put a lot of thought into it, we investigate, we make sure all parties, parents, students who are involved in the thing are in the loop and they're notified first, whether or not your kids are in danger or whatever. So, and then we remove the threat, and of course, the issue of confidentiality is huge with students. And, you know, I think the thing on Facebook, we want to know the name of the student. Well, as Sharon said, I can't release that name. That's a huge area of confidentiality. And I will put the same thing out that Sharon said to you as well. If it were one of your students, I guess, would you want their name on Facebook? And I think probably the answer to that question is no, you wouldn't. So they are kids, and we need to get them help. In order to do that, we need to protect their confidentiality. So, anyway, questions for me on that?
Well, I think, you know, one of the things that everyone needs to pay attention to is the individuals you're talking to, the student or whatever. In some cases, it was obvious that there was a problem there, whether it was mental, physical, financial, whatever. There are probably, I don't know how many, but I think I've read, there's a lot of kids in this county that are living under the poverty level. They're stressed. These kids are stressed. They come to school here and they're stressed. And things are gonna blow. Whether this is one place that can blow. And the thing that I see, and I'm not blaming anyone because I'm not here every day checking out the students to see how things are going. But it is obvious to probably a lot more you people, because you know the kids, you live here longer. The kids that are having problems. The kids that aren't getting enough to eat. The kids that aren't clothed right. And I think the teachers know that. They say, hey, I know that kid over there, there's a problem somehow. Because that kid is always hungry. Or that kid, when he comes to school with dirty clothes, or he comes to school with clothes that's old, or something like that. So those things, we as community members need to identify that also. It's not our responsibility. I'm not saying it's your responsibility to feed that kid or to clothe that kid or whatever, but to realize that if a kid's going to blow steam, it's probably going to be here at the school, because who else is going to listen? And there are kids that are, it may not be dangerous to themselves or others, they're just stressed. And you read about people that they say, hey, we've been in Florida. We say, hey, all those people have a lot of money or whatever. One thing that they brought up is they said, hey, we're going to shut the school down for 4 or 5 days. How are we going to feed the kids? There's lots of kids that if they don't come to school, they don't have the school meals, they don't get to eat. And when I was a kid, I did that. I ran across kids in my city, and I couldn't believe when I saw them that these kids were not getting things to eat. It surprised me. And I was 14 or 15. I said, my goodness, that kid is really hungry. But we have to realize
what you're doing. I think we're doing the best we can in that. We recognize kids of poverty, and we do the best we can. We have free and reduced lunch. We have free and reduced breakfast. I'm going to let Mrs. Warner talk about one teacher who's sending home. You want to talk about that real quick? I think that's worth bragging about.
Well, our teachers in your community are just amazing people in that. I have one teacher, and I was actually in her classroom last week and I'm doing observation. She was working in a small group in reading. She had 9 kids in this reading group. And I knew of 3 kids that were in foster care out of the 9. And that's how much our society has changed as first graders. She sends about 4 or 5 of her kids, and she has a whole classroom of kids. Normally this was just a small reading time. She sends home backpacks full of food for those kids so that they get food during the weekend. We've also, at the elementary school, gone to a grab-and-go type breakfast thing because we run breakfast at free and reduced rate from 7:45 to 8 o'clock. A lot of our kids don't make it to school. They just can't get to school. by 8 o'clock, and they aren't gonna learn anything if they don't have something in their stomach. So we have a grab-and-go breakfast. So our cooks, at 7:55, we cut breakfast off, and they put together sack breakfasts so that they can take those to the classroom so they aren't missing instruction time, so that they've got something in them. Then we also noticed that we just had kids that they hadn't eaten at night, so even though we fed them breakfast, they were really struggling to make it till our 11:30 lunch times. So the district picked up snacks starting in October, and we've been doing Atwell free snacks for all of our kids as well. We do a snack time at 9:15 during their morning recess time. Lots of the little guys, their parents send snacks automatically, but if you're hungry, you're hungry. It really doesn't matter what age you are. You're not going to be learning much.
So the snacks that you're talking about, is it the district that funds that? Or do you take donations?
We felt it was important, so we picked it up. And we're able, we've done, I don't know, somewhere around 1,500 elementary snacks. Teachers just count it up, they say, who wants a snack? And if they've got 10 out of 25 kids, they take a little box down to the cafeteria, they get the snacks, bring it back to the classroom, they eat it, and then go out to recess. But there's lots of ways to help like that.
But are there ways that as a community we could help?
We accept snacks of all kinds of any kind. Normally cheese sticks, juice or cheese sticks and granola. So we try to make it kind of healthy.
So Susan, I have another thing. I talked to a couple of the children students, and one teacher in particular has purchased underwear, socks, stuff like that. These kids are coming to school with none, or they're dirty. So if you have an extra $5, $10 and you go to Walmart or the dollar store, maybe pick up a pack of underwear or socks and give it to the school. It breaks my heart. I work right by DHS. I hear these kids. I see them. Today I heard kids screaming, and I text one of the ladies and said, "You're lucky I can't just come scoop them up and take them home," because I would. It kills me. So I've done it before, even socks that my daughter's grown out of that she's worn once or twice. I go send it back to the school because the kids get wet on recess, class, whatever. You know, some of them still have accidents. That's one way I think we can all help too.
We try very hard to not have our parents have to leave work. If your kiddo's little and they have an accident, or they're out in the mud and they get wet, we try and provide clothes and donations for parents so that we can just change them and go, because you guys all have work and commitments there as well. I think there's Jonas and you or somebody else did too.
I just have something real quick on this topic. So I've been thinking about creating a system so that if you have something to offer, I can connect it with a school need as far as kids. I might get emotional here. I have a lot of kids, and not just school shootings, but with mental health issues and no support at home, and I lose kids. Maybe not to school shooting, but I lose kids that I know they're going to walk out of my door and they're going to be in poverty still because their parents don't help them show up. And so I would just ask as a community, if you have anything you can offer, we don't have a big sister, big brother program, but if you want to email me, we do?
We sure do.
Okay, then we need to connect because I have
Kathy's got her
something.
hand, we'll let her go next.
Okay.
That was the thing I was going to just say. I'm not there anymore, but my heart is still there. I started the Lake County Youth Mentor Program, and it is for these kids that you're talking about, that need someone to talk to, that need someone to support them. The problem? None of the adults. We had a waiting list. The teachers and the schools have been awesome identifying kids. We don't have adults because you're too busy. You have your own kids. Well, so what? Candace just left. They were mentoring 2 and they have 8. So, you know, 9, yeah. So when you're looking at these kids, when you're saying, oh, the school has to do something about them, well, no. This community needs to do something, and you need to step up, and you need to be a mentor. And all it takes, you don't have to have a lot of skills. You just have to have a heart for kids. Now, yes, you have to pass a background check. But there are kids waiting for a friend. You don't have to have a lot of skills, and we only ask 1 hour a week. And, you know, if you're talking about you're so concerned that these kids are going to blow up, give an hour of your time.
And I will be a point of contact if you want to email me here at the school, and I will found whoever needs help, and I will connect you with that person. And if you want to start a club or an organization, we're a great sports community, but we have kids that don't play sports. And
Go to
they
the
need
Lake
a
County
connection.
It's at the ESD.
And like you can contact Mentor, but who's the new?
Leanne Davis
Leanne Davis.
is the new person.
Yeah, Lake County ESD, we're in the phone book. We have a full-time youth mentor program coordinator. We have another part-time person helping out, and they're accessible tons. They're constantly looking for adults. It's a very good system. It's organized. We have a system set up where we do background checks, all those kinds of things. So it's not just random. Is run very, very well. There's activities that they do for the mentors where they say, hey, mentors, we're all going to meet, we're going to go bowling, and they get bowling for, I don't know, next to nothing or nothing, or different activities, a barbecue or whatever. So if you're not sure what to do with this kid, just call and say, hey, I need an activity. What do I need to do? They can help you with ideas, things like that, taking them fishing, and whatever. And we've got the system set up. We're there, and you can talk to those kids, and you can work with those kids, and you can be that big brother, big sister to those kids. We're talking about kids that are frustrated. We're talking about kids that don't know what to do. We're talking about kids that are in difficult home lives. They need somebody to talk to, and if you want to be that person, please call ESD, and we will be happy to set you up with our mentor program, and we'll get you going. So we got lots of kids that need somebody.
Yeah, the schools have been great as far as trying to identify and find people like the kids. They identify the kids, but if you don't have, and the worst thing is the little kids identified, and once they know they could maybe have a mentor, they want them now. And so it takes a few weeks to get a mentor approved. So, give your time. It's something you can do easily.
I'll say one more thing. And I'm not talking about this community, but it's something that I heard. I said, oh my goodness, that makes a lot of sense. It was Jesse Jackson last year, so he was talking about another community where they had some problems, poverty or whatever, problems with the kids. And he just sat out there and he said, hey, he said, let me tell you something. He says, it takes a community to raise a kid. And he says, but it also takes a community to ruin a kid. So, he wasn't talking about Lake Jude and stuff, about other places, but I think people need to think about that.
I think the other thing I want to mention too is students in poverty. We've had 3 very special people who passed on, and they left memorial funds in their name to help kids. I think Fremont, Denny Duke passed away. A fund was left in her memory with a considerable amount of dollars in it to help kids. And what we've used it over the years is clothing, and specifically, physical education. When they can't afford tennis shoes, we'll use the Denny Duke fund to buy tennis shoes for kids. Same goes at Union School, the Gene Hoffman Fund. Here at Lakeview High School, like pay to play and things like that, when kids can't afford to do it, we have the J. Lamb Fund. So, we are very grateful to the donations in memory of all these fine folks, and we have used those 3 funds to help kids a lot. So anyway, I figured I would mention that. So I kind of went off on a tangent here. Jack, do you want to say anything more about student confidentiality, or you think we covered it? Because you're on the playbill with us here. Good. Okay. So with that being said, I think I'm ready for the juvenile program. I'm pleased to introduce Jake Greer, Buddy Ness, and Mark Alberson and Mary Sullivan. They have been here at school a lot. They've been fabulous counseling, helping us recognize threats, interviewing kids, and I'm very grateful to the juvenile department for the fine work they've done in assisting the schools.
Just to touch base on where Ms. Forrester left off with the individual involved with the list. I get this. We have received those reports from the town police department, and because the Oregon Supreme Court had ruled recently that before juvenile departments were able to talk to youth and parents about delinquency, they are to be appointed an attorney. So it's a slow process to get folks appointed, or juveniles appointed attorneys. So having said that, we are meeting with the attorney the youth and the parents on Tuesday the 20th to get services started, to get that youth engaged in the juvenile department and on the road to making smarter decisions. And that's what it boils down to in this day and age is our kids aren't stupid or dumb, they just make dumb decisions, the kids. I can't say I made those same kind of decisions as a kid because I was the kid that got up early, went bird hunting and left the shotgun in my car. While I went to school, and after school I went bird hunting again. Society's changed, we don't do that anymore. I grew up in a small rural community over in the valley. We all got together in the morning, that's what we did. And after school we did the same thing. What's changed? We can say video games, we can say parents and how parents are raising their kids and what parents are letting their kids get away with. I mean, we can go on and on and on about it. But the bottom line is it's a society issue, it's a community issue, and we need to focus on that. So with the individual and the hit list that Ms. Forster I brought up, the juvenile department works closely with the district attorney's office and law enforcement to try and, one, figure out who the kid is and what they did and what we can charge them with and how we can charge them. And then we got to work on a resolution. How are we going to solve the problem? What are we going to do? And there's a handout that was left back up there. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but once we get someone brought into the juvenile department, there's three ways we can go. We can, if it's a medical evidence crime, juvenile department's out of the loop if they're 15 or older. Or the juvenile department's out of the loop. The district attorney's office handles that. We're just there to assist her. We also have juvenile court intervention where we work with the district attorney to get that youth in front of the court, in front of the judge, and get them placed on formal probation where they answer to the court. And then we as the probation officers work that case. And should there be violations, good or progress made, we report that out to the court. And then we also have the non-court intervention, which is we work out agreements between the juvenile department and the youth and the family and the attorney. But these are some things you're going to do. You stay out of court. You do these things, you stay out of court, and that's a good thing. Because once we're in court, they're fingerprinted, that goes into the system, and then 20 years down the road, this could come up. Have you ever, depending on the kind of career our kids want to go into, have you ever is always on applications. So we want to try and reduce that, but we also want to hold our kids accountable. And there's measures in place to move up the chain to where, one, we take those informal probations or our low-level stuff and we get them into court. There's also measures in place to take those folks to detention, or either detention or confinement, but also send them to juvenile prison up in Salem. So there's a lot that we can do, but there's a lot that we don't want to do because, again, they're our children, but we also want to hold them accountable. Make one dumb mistake, one dumb decision that's worked on it that just doesn't affect me, but it affects the school, it affects the community in general. So with that said, when I came to Lake County and the juvenile department in 2012, I found that our staff at the time, we have a whole new complete staff across the board, our adult probation department and our juvenile probation department. I found that we were more reactive than we were proactive. So in 5 short years, I encourage my staff, and it's almost expected of our juvenile staff, to be in the schools, not just here in Lakeview, but we also have Paisley, and we also have Northlake. Get out, get to schools, get to know the kids, not to be a threat because we're juvenile probation officers, but to interact with the kids, to be proactive, to help limit the bullying, the harassment, the exclusion. Kids are excluded all the time in different things. Get the kids included, get them involved. We're very active in alternative school. It's called the Step Up program. We're very active there. The kids, once a week, go down to the gym and work out in the gym. My staff owns the gym, so we open up the gym to the kids. So they're trying to get them involved with something. Because as we all know, Lakeview doesn't have a lot to offer unless you're really digging for something to do. Because you can always find something to do in Lakeview. Good, bad, and indifferent. You can find something to do in Lakeview. But just trying to get our kids involved in something different, teach them something different, have them doing something different. So my staff are in the school often. We work real closely with the school district and also the law enforcement. And we have a great working relationship with the teachers, the counselors, across the board, all throughout Lake County. And that helps us build relationship with kids, but also it helps the kids have that trusting relationship with us, as well as the educators, the teachers, the counselors, the administration. If there is an issue and they're struggling, they can reach out. The kill list, the hit list that we were talking about earlier, that was a cry for help. That was a cry for help. That individual's name was on the list as well. So this individual wrote their name on the list, their best friend's name on the list, and then some other people on the list. It was just a cry for help. Knowing the individual and knowing the family background, it's a cry for help. So she's going to get that help. Unfortunately, it's not going to be volunteer. She's not volunteer for us. It's going to be expected to do it. All right, the other side of our juvenile department, this side is the probation department. So for the probation side of things, we have a youth investment coordinator, which is essentially how I look at it as a paid mentor. They're in the schools. They don't. Mark doesn't take the place of the school counselors. He complements the school counselors. Because there's 2 school counselors here at Lakeview High School, or here in Lakeview. One deals with elementary school, the other deals with everybody in this building. So having said that, Mark's job is to complement the school counselors and provide that support, provide that ear to listen to, and also give them advice and refer to services. I'll let Mark talk about his role in the school as a youth investment. So we wear many hats. We're not just the folks you have to deal with when you get in trouble. We're also in the schools trying to be more proactive than reactive. We find that it's working. Our caseload number has dropped significantly since I came here 5 years ago. And I think a lot of that has to do with the work the community's doing, the teachers are doing, law enforcement's doing, that we're all doing together. But we're not going to, it'd be great to say there's not going to be any more crime, there's not going to be more threats, there's not going to be more bullying. But I can't say that. It's not going to happen. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mark to talk about his programs.
I'm the youth investment coordinator, and I've been thinking, I know many of you guys, I've been thinking a lot about this all week, and how, as a community, we can handle this. But first I want to ask you all a question. I just want you to raise your hand if you or one of your family members have been to the doctor this year. Just go ahead and raise your hand. Pretty close to. How many of you guys have been to mental health? Crickets. Way less, right? The reason I say that is there's a big stigma with mental health, right? If one of you has cancer, we come running with plates of food. How can I help you? But if I say I'm going to mental health, all of a sudden I don't have any friends, right? It's a stigma. Like the sheriff said, like Will said, like all of us have said, like you've seen on TV, almost every one of those, not almost, every one of those shootings happen because of a mental health problem of some sort, right? So our first step as a community, because we're community partners, but we're all community partners. We're in this together, right? We're trying to solve this problem. We're trying to help these children. So our first step is let's get past the stigma of having mental health, right? We all, at one time of our life, have needed some help. whether it be counseling or with your marriage, your kid, something. If you haven't had mental health, you probably should have, right?
Right.
And so, let's not lie. We're all messed up, but our kids are in this pressure cooker, right? On top of mental health problems. And so my job is, as a youth investment coordinator, it's my goal to reach the lives of youth who feel alienated from their peers, who are in conflict with themselves, their family, school, or community. We want to affect new attitudes and behaviors in alienated or high-risk youths, but all of youths need it. You know, I remember as a kid, I would be considered high risk now, you know, what the level is. I was rowdy, little, I won't use the word I normally use. I wasn't a very good kid. It's like this. I used to have 2 blue litter dogs. They were the greatest dogs, unless you left them by themselves with nothing to do. And so, like Kathy said, it's not just my responsibility or Will's responsibility, it is all of our responsibility. And all of you guys have different skills, different things you like to do that we can hook up with these kids and change their lives. But my goal is to get them before the sheriff does, before Buddy does, before Jake does, before Sharon does, right? And so how does that happen? With the stigma of mental health gone, we go in and we go, hey, my kid isn't acting quite right. Or my kid's having a hard time. Can we get them some help? You come to me. I'm not a mental health therapist. I can help the kids out, but I have a limit where I'm in over my head, right? Then we go to mental health. And then we stop the problem before it becomes a crime. Before all hell breaks loose. Before the sheriff's called for an active shooter, right? That's my job. And so, as a community, if we're having problems with a kid, it doesn't matter if the kid is high risk or in juvie or not, it doesn't matter. You bring it to me. And then I'll bring it to whoever else needs to go to. You see what I'm saying? That way we stop the problem before it becomes a problem. Do we need to do security in the school? Very much so. Because I'm not going to catch everything, right? You're not going to catch everything. But if 1,000 eyes are better than one, 1,000 hearts are better than one, right? And so, let's get the schools secure. Let's get our kids' heart and mind right? And that's when community things change, right? Because we're in it together. We're not at war with each other. We all want the same thing. We all want our kids to graduate, right? We all want our kids to be protected. We want all of our kids to succeed. Same goal. All right?
I think just because I think that removing the stigma of mental health, part of it is understanding that it's not just, it's depression, it's anxiety, it's everybody in this room has dealt with it. So that's, because I think even for myself, I actually looked up the definition of mental illness before the thing happened, because I immediately think like schizophrenic, major bipolar, though that isn't what mental health is. Mental health is depression, which I'm sure everybody here is about. It's anxiety. And I think now with the pressures that kids have, all of our kids deal with that at some point on some level. So I think I think everybody thinks of it that way, that it's not just
a schizophrenic child. It's not just somebody who has major bipolar. A child who, they're, depression. I have 2 high school kids. Both of them have had some sort of depression or some sort of anxiety at some point. Those are the signs that you need to look for. It's not just the severe cases of, so I think I think once the kids realize that too, that if you have to go and see a mental health counselor, it's not that I think that's a big thing. Removing that stigma that there's something majorly wrong with you, all of us have dealt with that at some point. Anyways, just because I had to look that up myself.
And we'll be working to break that stigma in our community.
So kids are under a lot more stress than I was in school.
Thinking of all the stuff that was said in this room, it is not government. Our government is big enough, but we don't have enough government here. It is we the people. We're the answers to our kids' problems and ourselves. Government is not the answer. They're there for backup. And government is big enough, and we as a people need to do whatever we can. It's a struggle every day, one step at a time. And I don't feel bad that I rose my hand that I'm in counseling, because I need to be in counseling. And I don't feel that I am any less than anybody or any better than anybody. I just have to do it for me and my family. And whatever the Joneses are doing across the street, I don't care. I have to work in my own backyard. And our backyard is Lakeview. My backyard is wherever I want to be. And my kids. But my kids have friends, and they have feelings. They have feelings. And anyway, it's not government's job.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I'm going to invite Jack Thompson and Ryan Tack to come next. Jack, you superintendent ESD and Falls City. And we have a program up here called the Threat Assessment Program. And it helps us recognize threats, issues of safety, issues of possible student threats before they happen. It's a very systematic program. I'll let them talk about it.
Good. You just heard about half my speech.
Next time I'll say, here's Jack.
Yes, right. First off, I'm not that new. I've been here since July. One of the things that I noticed when I came to Lake County and started talking to some of the administration, I realized that how we dealt with issues with kids was different depending on which district you were in. And that was a little bit disconcerting for me because where I came from, Fall City, we had this thing called the threat assessment. Now, I don't take credit for this. This was created by John Vanderbilt out of the Salem Kaiser School District. He's the originator of this process. This process is getting pretty close to being statewide, and it's actually getting a lot of national attention. What the process is, and what the idea behind this is, every one of us has been on a playground, and Johnny, it's always Johnny. I don't know why Johnny has this. But Johnny gets his ball taken away. And the first thing Johnny blows out of his mouth is, "I'm going to kill you." Okay? Well, it used to be, when I was a little kid, that when you would say that, the recess person would say, "Hey, knock it off, go play nice." And it was just boys being boys. But we don't get that option anymore. We don't get to say it's just boys being boys. Because God forbid that I, as the adult out there on that playground, maybe it's 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade or whatever, and I make that decision to say, no, it's just boys being boys, and God forbid something actually does happen. I don't want to be the one that said, well, yeah, man, I made that call. I decided it was just boys being boys. We don't get that option anymore. So what this process does is this creates a unified system of us being able to, or excuse me, the administrators, being able to look at a child in a systematic fashion and be able to make a determination, is this an issue? And at what level is this an issue? And so it's not something that it's going to have, every single case is going to be different. Because you're going to have kids that you've had the second grader on the playground that's yelling, I'm going to kill you because you took my ball. And then you've got the older child who may be saying the same thing, but there's a lot of other issues going on around that child. And you're going, you know what, wow, this is kind of crazy. I know this kid's got access to weapons. I know this kid's got access to, he's got a lot of mental issues, that he's had a lot of hatred things going on over time, these kinds of things. So we can look at all of these different things and we can talk about them. And maybe it's just boys being boys. Get that kid back into the classroom, not a problem. We can also look at it a little bit deeper and say, you know what, maybe we need to get this child onto a plan where we connect with that kid at the beginning of school, connect with them after school. Maybe it's something where we said, you know what, we're going to do a random backpack check on this kid. Every week, we do a random backpack check. There's lots of different things we can do based on this threat assessment. Okay? And what we brought Ryan in, hired Ryan to come in, and he has gone to Salem and done the training, and he has gone around. Well, I'll let you tell. What have you done? What have you done?
So I got hired in November. I have 3 jobs really. This is the ESD job, so everything I said is the ESD side of the world. So I started in November, December. I went to Salem Kaiser in their system. 2 years ago, the state legislature tried making this a statewide system. They couldn't come up with funding. However, they did come up with some other things which can be incorporated. So what happened is districts, Salem Kaiser's had this for 2 decades, but districts like Lakeview took on doing this on their own, with their own money, and that's how I got here. Pretty much, first order of business, there's 2 parts to this. There's level 1, level 2. Level 1 is what we call school-based. Level 2 is community-based. So level 1, the teams usually consist of the administrators, the case agents. So it'd be the administrator or someone with administrative powers. It'd be maybe a teacher that was involved, whoever they find that might need to be there. Could be juvenile, could be DHS. And then we want a mental health aspect. So we want a counselor, someone that's been trained in mental health. They're there as well. Different discipline, different understanding. We also want law enforcement there. Law enforcement's also been through a training. All 3 of these entities, administrative, mental health, and law enforcement, has gone through training. I think we're about 20 school officials and 3 law enforcement officers have taken the training and have went out for it a couple times. And that includes North Lake County and Paisley as well. So they take it. If the concern is alarming, then they can push it to a level 2. If they think they have the resources to handle it and they can monitor safely in a school, they'll continue. And they'll set a plan in place to protect the student that is making the threat or the student of concern. They'll also set up a procedure to protect anyone that might be identified as the victim. They keep control of it until either the threat is dissipated. The whole part of this process is not to look forward. We're looking at a snapshot. We're taking a picture at the time. We're not going to predict what's going to happen in the future. So each time there's something new comes up, we can do another one. That process of that snapshot is determined, is this a threat or is it a threat or is it pose a threat? Kids make threats all the time. We make threats all the time. But is it actually posing a threat? Is it a security and safety concern for the school? Goes to level 2, that's where the community partners become involved. We currently use the child NDT to handle any issue that would come up, which is run by the Lake County District Attorney. That's where all the partners meet once a month, and we can discuss what we're doing with the child, things to improve on, things that we don't need to do anymore. Maybe their life's got better. Maybe there's some reason for it to improve, or maybe we need to start enforcing stricter ideas and motivation. So that's kind of the snapshot of it. I'm kind of the gutter for it. I kind of hopefully keep everyone engaged and make sure it doesn't slip by. So on part of that, it's a big issue we fight with is the code of silence. If a kid's gonna report it, their friends usually have been already told about it. It's what they call leaking. Every school incident has been a concern to the community, a parent, or a teacher. None of these incidents, and I'm not calling them what we call a school shooter, because that's actually a term that motivates some individuals. Same thing of active shooters. Because now we have people like the Florida shooting that he wants to become a professional one. They are motivated by that thrill and that excitement to get notarized. So in that case, we have students that need to be able to speak freely and express what their friends are saying. So the schools are combating the code of silence. They can tell administrators, they can tell me if they want, but ultimately it falls with the administrator. And the big important thing with these issues is that we just work together, multidisciplinary, and are figuring it out together. But that's kind of the process start to finish. It's new, so
Yeah.
I'm learning.
So, again, this is a way that we can standardize this. We can try to keep kids in school as much as we possibly can. The whole idea behind this, the whole premise behind this, is it's preemptive. We take the time to look at a child a little more in depth and ask ourselves strategic questions about this child and do we need to do further things with this child. Because the idea is that we are preemptive on any of these bad things happening, and we look at giving them supports and stuff before any of this stuff happens. So, the last thing I have to say, and my thunder got stolen, but I'm going to say it anyway, is we're talking about kids with needs, we're talking about kids with struggles and those kinds of things. And again, please, 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 if you have any inkling about becoming a mentor for some of these kids with struggles, and I'm not talking about, you're not the one that's going to be counseling them, you're not the one that's going to feed them, you're not, just giving the kid a big brother or a big sister to be able to help them out. Please contact ESD and the mentor program. Catherine created this thing, and I give 100,000 kudos to her for what she did here. She created something in this community that didn't exist almost anywhere else. And we've got some pretty good attention on this. We've got some pretty good awards for this program. So please think about it. It's not like being a foster parent where you're going to have to give the kid 24/7 care. We're talking about an hour a week. You can give more if you want, but just we have that ability to help out a couple of kids in the community. Take them to do things with them. Take them home, take them fishing. So just have a conversation. All right, any questions about the, go ahead, sir. Oh, I got two. Okay, yes?
I understand that this is forbidden now. A kid on a third grader, fourth grader goes, I'm gonna get you, as we all did. I'm old, so I was a young person. We used to play cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians. You can't do that anymore. Is that a threat assessment? I mean, the kid goes like this, does he go to the principal? Because we've got a proliferation of guns around us. We've got Second Amendment rights that people sanctify. So guns are important in our culture, but yet if a kid goes, does he get a threat assessment? Is he sent to the principal?
I don't want to speak for Susan, I'm going to let her speak, but it's going to be totally, my feeling is it's totally intent, but I'm going to let Susan address it, so you go ahead.
I'll keep it brief because it's getting later tonight. When we have a first, second, third, fourth grader, these little guys, they do that. They're around guns all the time. So we had to put some trust in me to deal with that in a disciplinary situation. So the normal course of action is, I bring the little person in, why are you doing this? We're playing a game. And I explain to them that this is not appropriate school behavior. There's behavior that's more appropriate with your family. You can go play guns with your big brother and shoot like with your fingers, but that's not appropriate school vocabulary. It's not appropriate school behavior. And so we've had to remove that from play at that level. And what they're talking about with threat assessment is, maybe I have a kid that's a little bit older that does the same thing, but they say, next week at your house. Then I have a target and I have more intent. And so that's where I would get a hold of my threat assessment committee. But I have to make the call as to where that goes. But I have lots of things in place with these threat assessment steps to help me out, where it goes from a disciplinary level within the school to a threat assessment. I hope that clarifies that for you.
I think we had a second question.
The school liaison officer, we used to have one and we don't have one anymore. Is that your job? And are you a replacement?
No, I'm removed from law enforcement. That's law enforcement and,
So we don't have one, and
yeah, but
what is the cost for that? Is it more cost effective than the buzzing and all the other things? They have metal detectors in some schools and stuff, so are we going to get a liaison officer, or is it coming back? Or?
Well, we've been discussing it with, PD, we discussed it with juvenile department, and we discussed it with the sheriff's department. And then we used to be grant funding for it too. We did used to have a school resource officer. Then the great bubble of 2008 burst, the recession hit. All of us had to cut, and that was the first thing to go. And it was a very useful presence on campus back then. If we had anything suspect in regard to anything related to school violence, drugs, alcohol, bullying, all those things, they were just more than an officer. They were also a counselor, a mediator, and a very essential presence to our operation here. So the answer is yes, we will try to bring them back and see what we can do. I've been in discussions with all our partners, and that is something we're working on. In a perfect world, we probably should have one in every building, but with the cost of this, probably it would be one for the district. And it's a start.
Well, I have another idea. I remember back in the old days, since we were talking cops and robbers, the old posse days. In Anchorage, we had security teams, and it was part of staff. It wasn't an extra person, but they would do security type things, check and make sure doors. I've walked in this building lots, and during passing, there's rarely a teacher out in the hall. They're going to the bathroom or something, but I've seen there's no presence in the hall during passing a lot of times. And the district I came from, that was important to be that the population was bigger. It was a lot bigger of a population, and I think that could be a simple solution too. That's less costly.
Any other questions directly about threat assessment?
But basically, something that Bill said before. You stand against the law for anyone to have a weapon within 1,000 feet of a public school. Okay, well, sometimes, there's houses that are within 1,000 feet. So that's not realistic. I'm sure some of those people might have weapons, hunting weapons and things. But when you say no weapons, do you mean pistols and also hunting rifles?
We mean everything.
Okay. I'm not sure.
According to policy, learning Department of Education,
Right.
it says gun-free zones, schools will be gun-free zones.
Okay, I'm going to stop you just for a minute. Any other threat assessment, and then Will and I are going to sit down. We don't like standing up here. So. Ryan, excuse me, Ryan and I are going to sit down. Is that real okay?
It's got to do with the threat assessment. Most of us have hunting rifles, etc. And I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure I've heard of kids during hunting season bringing to school their hunting rifles. And then stick them in the trunk, and they say, hey, once I get out of school, I'll go down to the hills, I got a license, we'll go down hunting. You can't just leave him, I'm not going to run to my house, wherever they live, West Side or, Paisley, wherever. But what I'm hearing people say is that's not allowed for those kids to bring their hunting rifles in the trunk to school. And I think that's a good idea because of the situation they have. But it seems to me like that might be a threat. To have people bringing young kids, you know, they may don't, you know what I mean?
Well, a threat more is a direct, you have to have a person, and there has to be an intent to it. I mean, just a possession of something in a window is not necessarily a threat. Now, if the school says that there's a concern with that subject, then that might be part of the process, and that might elevate it to a higher level of response on us. But just the possession of a weapon in a car, you know, that's up to the administrator. If they feel that they want one, then they'll do one. But that's kind of where they screen it.
Bill said against the law to have for those.
That would be a law enforcement concern if it's against the law.
It's against
or
the law,
school.
it's a state law for those kids or teachers to have honey rifles in their car. I'm just saying that if that's the rules, are we telling the kids that? And you can't bring your honey rifles, your honey seeds, stick them in the back of your car, or adults do that too, you know. I've been with the attorney and said, hey, you know, we're gonna take a trip away. And the fellow said, well, you know, I don't need to pay for it, because I also have a rifle in my, I have a honey rifle in my truck. As soon as I get out of this courtroom, I'm going free. We're gonna run the Cyber Falls and people are gonna fight.
Yeah, well, it's not a threat unless there's something else to it and they want to call it. But the gun-free zone, there are exceptions to certain things, and that would be up to the school and the law enforcement to figure out if they feel that they need to be
Your
recorded.
gun-free zones, I should clarify, is a school resource officer goes out and trains arms on campus. And,
I'm not talking about
our school resource officers used to have.
students and teachers.
What?
It's a gun-free zone. It's a gun-free zone.
Yeah.
They're not allowed.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's what you were saying, when we have exceptions. I don't think there are any.
Come to visit me, I'll show you the policy for that. It says gun-free zone. I looked at that last week.
No, I believe you, I'm just saying, looks like there's some community problem there with honey rifles.
I can't answer the hunting rifle question. Maybe law enforcement can.
The law's the law.
Law enforcement, can you answer this question?
You have to have probable cause.
Look, the bottom line is, in this gun-free zone, the guns are not allowed on the property. If they're on the property, we have reason to believe they are. This is how I'm going to handle it. I'm going to go to the school principal and I'm going to say, inform them of the information we have. I'm going to ask that they bring the kid to the principal's office. We're going to ask if there's a firearm in the vehicle. If they comply and say yes, we go out there and we're going to take the firearm. Now, what is the intent? You have to look at the intent of what the person is doing. Did they intend to bring the gun here for the purposes of causing somebody harm, or they just make a mistake? Now, we can't just go absolutely crazy and just punish everybody for making mistakes. So, if they got a clean record, if there's no problems ever at the school, they make a mistake, that gun is going to go home with them immediately. They're probably going to be warned and chastised by the school. If it happens again, there might be expulsion or whatever the case is. We would allow the school to make that decision as to how you want to handle it. Now, in another situation, if they bring that gun here for the purposes of doing something stupid, they're going to be charged with a crime. Or what we could do is we could charge them with a crime regardless and let the DA make the decision on whether to charge them. Because all the arrests go to the DA's office, the decision to charge lies within her authority. But that's the way I would handle it.
Okay, I think that the notification confidentiality thing, Susan covered structural safety and improvement. We've come to the end of our agenda. I'd be happy to take more questions from the audience on anything else that's been said.
Just as a parent and a teacher, I just want a response time to the high school, but as a parent to union, just out of curiosity.
It depends on where we are at the time. We're at the courthouse. What is it going to be, 15, 20 minutes? Maybe depending on traffic, weather conditions, so on and so forth. Could be longer than that. But the bottom line is it's going to take too long for us to get from here to there if there's an issue.
Someone had to leave asking me to ask you this question. When your team comes onto a situation where there's a shooter, it's a what kind of weapons do you have? Are you also using not a automatic weapon like an AR?
There's three of us that have class 3 weapons, which means they're fully automatic. Myself, my undersheriff, Lynn Smith. We're going to utilize whatever tool is necessary to eliminate the threat. If it's our sidearm, we're going to use that. If it's our long gun, we're going to use that. It's discretionary. It doesn't make any difference. In order to eliminate the threat, let's just say hypothetically the person's out on the roadway with a gun, I'm going to run him over. I'm not going to slow down and get out of my car and engage him with firearm. I'm just going to run him over. End story. So it is discretionary. What is the threat? What is the tools that you have available to you? So it's whatever you have available to you at the time that's going to take care of the problem.
I don't know what is coming from, but basically, there are 3 of you that are authorized automatic weapons.
Well, no, all of us, all law enforcement is authorizing the use of class 3 weapons. And class 3 weapon is an automatic weapon. It's who has them assigned to them is the person that will use them. All of our deputies carry a shotgun, a sidearm, and a semi-automatic rifle, with the exception of 3 of us that we have fully automatic.
Heidi.
I just had a couple things to say because I'm on the medical side, and there's a lot of my heroes in here as far as in the medical world and EMS. The best tools that we have are right here, you, the parents. And one of the biggest things, because of what we do, we get a lot of input when people talk to us about the school shootings and how these kids are dying. And my father brought it up. They're dying, they're bleeding out. You don't have to wait for us to do something, to put something in place. Learn how to put tourniquets on yourself. Teach that to your kids. The suitcase candle kids, I mean the little ones that you gotta carry around, there's different protocol. But you're the best weapon that we have of saving your kids. Learn first aid. Learn how to stop bleeding. Learn how to put a tourniquet on. As Bobby said, we're trying to get tourniquets into school. That's how these kids are dying, is from blood loss. And those kids, from what I know and what I've read and what people have talked to me that have been in these situations, when we're teaching our students how to take care of themselves, how to take care of their other friends, if this happens, God forbid, if they're a part of the solution, meaning they know how to put a tourniquet on their friend because it was in the classroom, that's going to help them. They're part of the solution. So you don't have to wait for us to give you all of these tools. You as parents, the ones that are here, that have kids that are interested in helping other kids, from getting food, from getting clothes, you have the tools and you have your own children in this community. Make them aware, make them smart, but teach them these skills. They're the best weapon we have. We can have all the guns in the world, but we are not going to be here when the first shot goes down. But your kids are here and the teachers are here. And that's what we need to teach them, to be smart, to know how to put on the tourniquets, to know how to take care of each other. We can have all the solutions. We can have the law enforcement side, we can have the teachers, but it's the community in general and how we're teaching our kids and teaching them to be good in this community and in their schools. So Clint and I support anything that the law enforcement, the teachers do. As far as the tourniquets, I'm making this, whatever tourniquets you need will help. But we need to teach them how to do that. We live in a rural area where they're either hunting, they're on farm equipment. It's a skill that they can use. It's not just for active shooters. We don't have to rob their childhood. But it's a skill you can teach them now because in the classrooms they are bleeding out. And so that is my
So if you don't have a tourniquet available in the high school, and I'm not trying to make light of this, or I'm not trying to embarrass anybody or anything like that, but there's thousands of tampons here in this school. Plug the hole. Put a tampon in the hole, and that will stop the bleeding. So that is readily available at these schools. I'm sure they have them in the women's restroom. The students here have them in the purses. We carry them on the SWAT team as the means to stop the blood loss. Is plug the hole. Take it in there, swell it, it'll stop the bleeding.
Okay, I just want to add to that. Talk to Abby Finetti, she's certified at the hospital, she's willing to train her teachers to use tourniquets. Working with Bobby, we've got to come up with the money to purchase her kit to train our teachers for the blood stop. That to me was one of my biggest concerns, because if my kids bleed now, I want somebody to do something. Don't just sit there and watch them bleed out till the medical team gets there. That's huge to me. So I don't know, dealing with the school in Abby, what we can do, where we can go forward with that to get all of our teachers trained. That way, in each classroom, and in the office, the secretary, I mean, anybody in the school, I think, should be trained for that, because you don't know who is gonna be there. Another thing, adding to Heidi's CPR and first aid, I had both my boys go through the CPR and first aid at the hospital last Christmas break. Best thing they did over their entire break. I encourage every parent to do it, and I hope the hospital can get a hold of the school. I think it was like $20, Abby, for each kid to go through it. Both my boys, they're 12 and 15 now, they have that training. I will be sending them back again probably next year if they offer it, to keep up on that, and I will probably be joining them. So that's something right here at our little hospital that's offered that I don't think everybody takes advantage of. So I'm gonna be working with Abby, Audie, the school, try to figure out what we can do for the blood stop. I think that's something we as a community need to make sure all of our schools have, on top of first aid and CPR. So if you can, get your kids in the CPR and first aid class at the hospital whenever it's offered. Well,
Chelsea, I'll add on to that. A couple things. First, for the first aid class, we do about 4 a year for youth. I only like to have 10 to 18-year-olds in that, because it just creates a good environment for them to learn and ask questions. I try to time it with the days that the school is off. So the next one I think is April 6th, which I believe is grade day. And then we'll do one after school too. So anyone can get a hold of me and I can get you on the list for that. Second, the class that Shelby's talking about is, I'm certified as an instructor for Stop the Bleed. It's an American College of Trauma Surgeons course, which is great. It's about 30 to 45 minutes. I can train any medical person to then be a trainer, and then they can train, and then they can train, and it can just grow from there. The cost is great. I think it's important to have tourniquets in every school. I also think it's important to have them in the courthouse and on the fairgrounds, wherever we have large amount of people. It's a life skill. I don't know. I mean, it's very important for shootings, because yes, a lot of people in Las Vegas, all of the shootings have bled out from non-fatal gunshot wounds that could have been stopped. I believe you need to have education to use the tools correctly. Otherwise, we don't even do it. But it's also a very important skill for being in a car, or being on a ranch, or riding a motorcycle. I think it's a great life skill to have, and I'm happy to help in any way I can. I actually brought an example of one tonight, in case anybody was interested. They are costly, about $30 each. If you're gonna have one, you need two, and that's per person, per injury. It's a lot of money to think about. But we have a grant writer at the hospital. We're already working on getting all of our funds together. Hopefully going to call the Collins McDonald grant this spring. And I have some other offers that we can use.
I have some people who are authors and other funding that maybe become available, and we have now Christie emailed me just today that she's found one at 2650 rather than 55, so that's great. So hopefully we'll be able to deal with that soon, and how can I?
Can I say, I've heard us talk a lot about helping with the blood and the shootings and whatnot. I would like to ask if we as a community, or as maybe the school district to the ESD, Jack, you've got lots of money, I know. Maybe bringing courses here on how to identify for our teachers, for our community, how to identify the signs that a kid is in trouble. Not just relying on poor Mark to do it all, or the parent not knowing and being ashamed. And I'll just say this quite frankly, I had brought some here through the Lake County Youth Mentor Program. Very few people showed up. We offered them free. Very few people show up because can't happen here. But if you can identify these kids, if you can start preventing it, as a lot of people have talked about, then you don't have to worry about the bleeding out and the guns. And I'm not saying you don't need to worry about that, but I'm saying prevention is probably your number one option. And we need to think about that. We need to think about how we're going to train people to identify the kids who are crying. And it's not just the poor kids without a home or without clean socks. It's some of the affluent kids too. And it's just kids and what's going on today. And just kind of trying to figure out how we can educate ourselves as a community as to what's going on and how to help these kids. And then showing up with training. Yeah.
Kind of piggyback on what everybody's saying, you know, in our previous meeting that we had, Bill, you were the go-to guy, and, right, for all of us.
Yeah.
So, like if Abby can get that trauma thing going, if you can make contact with Will when that's gonna happen, then he'll contact all of us.